The title of my message today is called He is Risen. It's forewarning, it's going to be might be a little longer, but we'll still get out of here by no later than 12:30. So okay, I'm going to do a lot of reading from the Bible, from Matthew 26. But first of all, now many of us know the story about Jesus. That's why we're here. Dying on the cross, rising on the third day, he was in the grave for 3 days. What we've been told, though, about the timing, that he died on Friday and then rose on Sunday morning, is wrong. He was in the grave for 3 days. Friday to Sunday is not 3 full days. It's just not. No matter how you count it, if you can count to 3, it is not 3 days. I'll explain why. So Jesus really didn't die on Friday. First, let's establish the 3 days. Matthew 12:40 says, "For even as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Jesus said that. So he himself said he would be 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. Now, what he all did down in the belly of or in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, I'm not positive. I can just imagine. Maybe he talked to some people. We know he took the keys to hell and the grave, and he kicked Satan's butt while he was down there. Wonder how many times he knocked him out. Wouldn't that be fun to see? All right, let's get back to it. Seriously, okay. Now, this is important. During the week of the crucifixion, there was a special Sabbath because of Passover. So there was actually 2 Sabbaths that week. The first Sabbath was Thursday, which was Nisan 15. The second Sabbath was Saturday, the normal weekly Sabbath that they always have. Thursday, Nisan 15, was the first day of unleavened bread. Leviticus 23:5, it says, "On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Lord's Passover. On the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy high calling together. You shall do no laborious work on that day." So the key to understanding the 3 days that Jesus was in the grave, this is the key to understanding the 3 days that he was in the grave. Now keep in mind, Hebrew days were from sunset to sunset. They weren't midnight to midnight. Like their days didn't start, at midnight. They started at sunset. So maybe, around 6-ish. So turn to Matthew, where I'm going to read from Matthew 26, starting with verse 17. All right, verse 17 says, "Now on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread," it doesn't say on the first day that it was unleavened bread. "On the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying to him, 'Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?'" Now this actually was Tuesday, Nisan 13. During the day was Nisan 13. Nisan 14 didn't start until sunset on Tuesday. You got to stick with me here. Believe me, I had a hard time understanding this myself. I was pretty close to tears yesterday because I was sitting there I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And then I called my mother and I got it wrapped around, so then it was okay. Okay, verse 18. And he said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples." Can you imagine the disciples like, you want us to go into a perfect stranger's house and tell him we're going to come and eat there? He did. 19. So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. So now it's evening now. So now it's actually Nisan 14, Tuesday night. Nisan 14 has started. Now as they were eating, he said, "Assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and each of them began to say, "Lord, is it I?" He answered and said, "He who dips his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him. But woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he never would have been born." Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered and said, "Rabbi, it is I." He said to him, "You have said it." And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But as I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Verse 30. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So they ate their Last Supper, and then they went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, picture this. They're walking to the Mount of Olives, and then they're kind of talking amongst themselves. So verse 31, they're walking and talking. They're walking to the Mount of Olives. Jesus says to them, "All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." Can you imagine what they felt when he told them that? Jesus told them, y'all are going to leave me. Just, y'all are going to leave me. Verse 32. "But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter answered and said to him, "Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble." You know, Peter's telling him, "Lord, I gotcha. I won't leave you." Jesus said to him, verse 34, "Assuredly I say to you that this night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, "Sit over there while I go over there and pray." So they get to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is a garden across the Kidron Valley on the Mount of Olives. So they got there, and Jesus says, go over there, go sit over there, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to pray. But he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee. The 2 sons of Zebedee were James and John. And he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." Jesus is asking him, stay with me. He needed some comfort. He needed his buddies around. He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O my Father, If it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but you will. Then he came to his disciples, and he found them sleeping. And he says, "What? Could you not watch over me for 1 hour?" Now he says, "Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Now again a second time he went away, and he prayed, saying, "O Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." And then he came, verse 43, and then he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, he went away, and prayed a third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples, and he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting?" Could you imagine? He's over here praying, and he comes back over here, and he says, and he sees them sleeping. "Are you sleeping? Could you not watch over me for 1 hour?" But Jesus loved them. I'm sure he forgave them for falling asleep on him. Now, verse 45. "Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." So he's telling them, "Come on, let's go." And, see, there they are. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Verse 48. Now his betrayer had given them a sign. Judas told the soldiers and the chief priests that he told them, "I'm the one that I kiss is the one that you want." That's horrible. I mean, betraying him was bad enough. Even I know it had to be done, but betraying him was bad enough. All he really had to do was just, point and say, "That's him." But no, he kissed him on the cheek. That is low. That is really, really low. Now 48 says, "Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, 'Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him.' Immediately he went up to Jesus, and he says," he had the nerve to even open his mouth and say, "Greetings, Rabbi." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" And then they came, and they laid hands on Jesus, and they took him. Let me back up a bit here. Luke 22:43. Now when Jesus was praying, Luke 22:43 says, "And there appeared to him an angel from heaven strengthening him. He was so distressed he needed an angel, and God his Father knew he needed an angel." Verse 44 of Luke 22 says, "And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly and intently. He prayed so hard, and he was so distressed that sweat of blood came out of him and dropped on the ground." Now, Matthew, where am I? 26:51 says, "And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand, drew his sword, and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear." Now in Luke 22:51 says that Jesus, cut off his ear, like cut it off. So his ear's laying on the ground. So Jesus picked up his ear and reattached it to the soldier. Luke 22:51 says that he healed the soldier's ear. That soldier is about to take him away, and Jesus knew what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen. And he still healed that soldier's ear. Verse 52. But Jesus said to him, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen?" It had to happen, and he knew that. 55 says, "In that hour Jesus said to the multitudes, 'Have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me.'" Now keep in mind, when they seized him, it was at night. It was in the middle of the night. They didn't want to seize him during the day because they knew if they did, they would have a big problem on their hands. People would have risen up. They would have had a mob. 55 says, "But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. So all the disciples just left him. And those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. Now again, keep in mind, this was Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, in the wee hours of Wednesday morning. Nissan 14 still. Now, 58 says, "But Peter, he followed at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, 'This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'" He didn't mean the physical temple, the structure. He meant himself. And the high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent. I don't know where it says this, but it says, I think in Isaiah, "He was led like a lamb to the slaughter and did not open his mouth." Uh, 63. But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest answered and said to him, "I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to them, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." That high priest must have lost his mind. He must have just lost his mind, because they didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. They were blind, so blind. They were blind, though, I believe, with greed and power. They didn't want the power taken away from them. So I think the devil really, had scales over their eyes so they couldn't see. 65 says, Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do you have of witnesses? Look now, you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think? They answered and said, He is deserving of death. 67. Then they spat in his face, and they beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands. "68 says, saying, Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you? They mocked him and they beat him. Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him, saying, You were also with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied it before them, saying, I do not know what you're saying. And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him, and said to those who were there, This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth. But again he denied it with an oath, I do not know the man. And a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, Surely you also are the one with them, for your speech betrays you. Then Peter began to curse and swear, saying, I do not know the man. Immediately a rooster crowed. Peter remembered what Jesus had told him. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out and he wept bitterly. Can you imagine how he felt? All right, chapter 27. When morning came, all the chief priests, now keep in mind, now this was Wednesday morning. This was still Nisan 14. This is still in the early morning. When the morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. They did a lot of, they took him a lot of different, couple different places in those wee hours of the morning, in the early morning. Then Judas, his betrayer, saying that he had been condemned, Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful, and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said to him, What is that to us? You deal with it. You did it, it's done. No matter, if you're sorry about it now, it doesn't matter. And then Judas threw the 30 pieces of silver at them and threw them down. Chief priests took the 30 pieces of silver, and they couldn't put it in the treasury because they said that it was the money from the price of blood. So what they did with those 30 pieces of silver was they took it and they bought a field called the Potter's Field, otherwise known today as the Field of Blood. Verse 9 says, Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was pierced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. 11. Now Jesus stood before governor, and the governor asked him, saying, Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said to him, It is as you say. And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he said nothing. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" The governor probably stood there and is like, "Come on, say something. Defend yourself." He didn't understand why Jesus didn't say anything, why he just let it happen. Verse 14 says, "But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly." The governor was probably at a loss for words himself, wondering why this man is not defending himself. Verse 15 says, "Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, 'Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?' For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy." Pilate knew that Jesus did nothing wrong. He knew that they wanted to get rid of him because they were jealous. Jesus was getting all the attention. Jesus was working miracles. Jesus had a following, and they weren't getting followed. The Pharisees people weren't following them anymore. They weren't listening to what they had to say. They were listening to Jesus more. Jealousy. Verse 19, "While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, 'Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him.'" His wife told him, "Don't condemn that man, or we're going to be in trouble." She knew. Verse 20, "But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus." The governor answered and said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" They said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." Then the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." Pilate knew he didn't do anything wrong. The people just didn't like him. The people just hated him. They couldn't even say. They had to get false people to false witness against him. Verse 24, "When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all," Pilate knew that it was a lost cause. Pilate knew that there was nothing he could do to change the mob's mind, but rather that a tumult was rising. He took water and he washed his hands before the multitude, saying, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it." So Pilate said, "You know what? I'm not doing anything. You guys deal with it, because he didn't do anything wrong. His blood's not going to be on my hands." Then they released Barabbas to them. And when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. That word "scourged" means whipped. He was whipped with a whip that had spikes on it, and it is called a cat o' nine tails. Them spikes were like this. And we're told that it was 39 times. 39. Every time he got whipped with that, it took chunks of flesh out of his body. 39 times. In Isaiah, it says that he was marred and beaten so bad that you could not even tell he was a man. They didn't even do that to murderers and robbers. But yet they did that to Jesus, the Son of God. Verse 27 says, Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. The thorns were like about an inch long. And they took that reed, before handing it to him, they took it and they beat him on the head with it, driving those thorns into his head, into his scalp. You know what, though? I bet you when these people died and they met him, it says every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. So eventually they did bow and confess. For real. That he is King of the Jews. Verse 30, Then they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off of him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified. Verse 32 says, Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. He was beaten so bad, and he was pretty much so done for, he couldn't even carry the cross anymore. Because originally he did carry it, but he couldn't go on any further. So that's when they grabbed Simon of Cyrene and had him carry the cross. And when they had come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, place of a skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he had tasted it, he would not drink it. 35. Then they crucified him and divided his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Sitting down, they kept watch over him, and they put over his head the accusation written against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Now I remember hearing something to the fact that the Pharisees didn't want that sign put up. They didn't. But Pilate said it's going up. It's going up. That's what's just going to happen. 38 says, Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads, and saying, You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from that cross. Likewise, the chief priests also mocking with the scribes and elders said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now. If he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. Now keep in mind, people knew about the 3 days. Everyone knew about the 3 days. They said it again. 3 days. Verse 45 says, Now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour there was darkness all over the land. Jesus was hung on that cross at 9 o'clock in the morning. They did their crucifixions in the mornings. So they would have all day to die. So Jesus died around 3 o'clock Wednesday, Nisan 14. Right before it turned into Nisan 15, sunset to sunset. So he died at 3 o'clock, and it was still Nisan 14. A lot happened in that 24 hours. But he had to get put into the grave by 6 o'clock because at sundown, because that's when the Sabbath started. Nisan 15 was the first day of the unleavened bread. That's when the Sabbath started. So he had to be put in a grave. He had to be taken down and put in the grave before the holy day started, which was the Nisan 15. Verse 46 says, And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of those who stood there when they heard that said, This man is calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and offered him to drink. The rest said, Let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come and save him. Can you imagine how ticked off God was at these people? I mean, seriously. God was probably up in heaven thinking, oh man, once I get a hold of you, you better change your ways. That was his son. Verse 50, and Jesus cried again with a loud voice, and he yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, and the rocks were split. It also says it was dark for 3 hours in the middle of the day. Just dark in the middle of the day for 3 hours. And then you've got the veil of the temple, and it wasn't like a cloth. It wasn't like a cloth veil. It was stone, and it just in two, top to bottom, just in two. And the earth shook underneath them. And rocks split. Can you imagine? I bet you they realized some of them, if, their eyes finally were open, they realized what they just did. They realized what they just did. The grave, 52, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. These people who had died went and visited other people. And it was talked about and told about. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, and they feared greatly, saying, this was the Son of God. See, they knew. They knew what they did. I'd be willing to bet a lot of those people got on their knees and begged for forgiveness. And many women who were following Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, they were looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Now when evening had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea, named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate, and he asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. Again, Jesus had to come, he had to be taken down, and he had to be put in the grave before sunset. So this man went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of rock, and he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb, and then he departed. So he laid Jesus in the tomb, where he wrapped him up and laid him in the tomb, and then put the stone in front of it, and then left. And Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite the tomb. Now on the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate. They said, Sir, we remember him while he was still alive, saying, after 3 days I will rise. See? They remembered. Therefore, command that the tomb be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead. So the last deception will be worse than the first. Now they went to Pilate on, Jesus died Wednesday evening, early evening. He was laid in the tomb at 6, which 6 o'clock is sunset. So sunset is now Nisan 15, Thursday. So then Thursday, they go to Pilate and they tell him, hey, we need to secure this tomb so his disciples don't take the body and then, fake it and say, yeah, see, he was Jesus because his body's gone. So this is Thursday morning, Nisan 15. Or Thursday during the day. I'm not sure what time they went and talked to Pilate. 64 says, therefore command that the tomb be made secure unless the third day, I already said that. Lest his disciples come and steal the body. Okay, 65. Pilate said to them, "You have a guard. Go your way. Make it as secure as you know how." So then they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. Chapter 28, 1 says, "Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb." So, we've got Thursday, Wednesday night to Thursday night is 1 day. Thursday night to Friday night is 2 days. Friday night to Saturday night at sunset is the 3 days. So when Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, I'm not sure, Mary, the mother of James and John, they went on, they couldn't go on Thursday because that was a holy day. They went on Friday and they bought spices. And they prepared those spices to be, because they wanted to anoint Jesus' body. But then Saturday was a Sabbath. So they bought the spices on Friday, prepared them and everything, but Saturday was a holy day. That was their Sabbath, their normal Sabbath. They couldn't go on Saturday to anoint him. That's why they waited until Sunday morning. And it says that they went Sunday morning before the sun rose. So they went very, very, very early Sunday morning. But remember now, Jesus' body, they couldn't anoint him on Sunday morning because he was already risen. He was gone. But remember the lady with the alabaster jar of the oil, the very expensive oil? She poured over Jesus' head to anoint him. The disciples, some of them got upset and said, hey, don't do that. You're wasting it. That money could be, this oil could be sold and the money could be given to the poor. But Jesus said in Matthew 26:10, it says, "But Jesus, fully aware of this, said to them, 'Why do you bother the woman? She has done a noble, praiseworthy, and beautiful thing to me. For you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me.'" Jesus said this, "In pouring the perfume on my body, she has done something to prepare me for my burial." So he was still, even though they couldn't anoint him on Sunday morning because he was already gone, his body was still anointed. Okay. Where am I? Okay, verse 2. Now they're going to the tomb. They're all walking there to the tomb to anoint him. They have their spices. They're ready to go there and anoint him, do their thing. They get there. Now, and behold, there was, verse 2, "And behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning and his clothing as white as snow. The guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men." Could you imagine? Now, I bet you those guards, they knew that was a son of God. Okay. I bet you they got on their knees and begged for forgiveness. But the angel answered and said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who is crucified. He's not here, for he is risen. As he said, come see the place, and he said, come and see the place where the Lord lay. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you." Verse 8, "So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to bring his disciples word." So they went and they told the disciples. So as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them and saying, rejoice. So they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. Verse 11 says, now while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. The guards went and had to tell the chief priests what happened. I mean, they were put in charge of this grave. And the body's gone. Angels came. The earth shook. The rock rolled away in front of them with nobody moving it, except this big old humongous angel dressed all in white, radiating. So when they assembled, verse 12, when they assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, again with the money, saying, tell them his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure. Pretty much, don't worry if the governor finds out. We won't let him kill you. We'll cover your back. We'll make sure that you're okay. So they took the money and did as they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had appointed for them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So, he is alive up in heaven. And he does visit people every now and again. But he did not die on Friday. No. So let's go over this just one more time. He died Wednesday night, Nisan 14, Wednesday night. So now Wednesday night to Thursday night is 1 day. Thursday night to Friday night, sunset, is 2 days. Friday night to Saturday night, sunset, is 3 days. He said that he would be in the heart of the earth for 3 days. If he died on Friday night to Saturday night is 1 day. Jesus said that there were 12 hours in a day and 12 hours in a night, 24 hours. So you can't even say that a day is 12 hours, because Jesus said a day is 12 hours and a night is 12 hours. I don't know exactly where that is, but I know it's in here somewhere. So, he didn't die Friday night. So, kind of clarify that for y'all. But yeah, he is risen. He is up in heaven. And today we celebrate it. Hallelujah. All right. So, that is about all I have. It's still not that late. Good. Awesome sauce. All right. Well, you ready for a blessing? All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord turn his countenance toward you and grant you shalom and place his name upon each one of you. Amen. again, during my message, we discussed the veil that was torn in two when Jesus died on the cross. I just felt I needed to clarify about the veil. Mark 15:37 through 39 says, "And Jesus cried with a loud voice and gave up the ghost. And the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom. And when the centurion stood over against him, saw that he so cried out and gave up the ghost. The centurion said, 'Truly this was the Son of God.'" Now it's said that Herod's temple was built to the dimension of Solomon's temple. The veil was in the temple. 1 Kings 6:19 through 20 says, "And the oracle he prepared in the house within to set there the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And the oracle in the forepart was 20 cubits in length, and 20 cubits in breadth, and 20 cubits in height thereof. And he overlaid it with pure gold, and so covered the altar, which was of cedar." A cubit is 18 feet, or a foot. A cubit is 18 inches, or a foot and a half. So the Holy of Holies was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high, which means that veil was 30 feet long. The veil had to be 30 feet high to block off the view of the Holy of Holies, because only the high priest was allowed in the Holy of Holies. Now, 2 Chronicles 3:14 says, "He made the veil between the holy place and the Holy of Holies of blue, purple, and crimson colors, and fine linen, and embroidered cherubim on it." It says that it was also woven. Now, the thickness of it, no one knows exactly how thick the veil was. It's been said that the veil was hand thick, like this, 4 inches. And the veil was, keep in mind, the veil was 30 feet high. So no one is tall enough to reach the veil. The veil was thick, so it couldn't be torn. They also say that 2 horses could not have pulled it apart in two with all of their strength. Now, it was a long ways. The veil was, like I said, 30 feet high. No man can reach that high. No man has that strength to tear a 4-inch thick woven fabric in 2 pieces. But God. Now, when God tore that veil in two, that was to signify that no longer do we have to go to a priest in order to go to God. We do not have to go through a priest in order to get to God. We now ourselves have access to God just by going to God ourselves. We don't have to go through a priest and then that priest go to God. We ourselves can go to God anytime we want. God wanted us, by tearing that veil in two, God wanted us to have access to Him anytime we wanted. And believe me, you guys, God wants us to access Him as much as possible. God loves to be in a relationship with us. God wants us to access Him all the time. So I just kind of I felt that I needed to clarify the veil from the sermon earlier, that it was thick. A human couldn't tear it in two. Only God could do what he did. And the symbol of that, you guys, is that we can have our own intimate relationship with God the Father. That's what he wants. That's why Jesus had to die on the cross, so that we could live forever with him in glory one day. Jesus is coming back for us. And we better be ready. He rose from that grave. But he's coming back, and we better be ready. Okay, y'all have a very, very blessed resurrection day.